We're going to ask you in a minute to line up at the microphone, so you might get prepared for that. In the meantime, I'd like to ask the panel one other question, because we've heard predictions of the end of the world before. We've heard about alignments before. We've heard about cosmic catastrophes before. And my question to you guys is to speculate for a minute why this is getting more traction than some of these earlier predictions and earlier ideas. Would anybody on the panel care to comment on why this is getting more traction?
I'm sure most of us can figure out the internet has something to do with it as a means of mass disinformation. But also, I think it's because the Maya have always been called the mysterious Maya. You know, everybody thinks of them as either, which I say is the movie Apocalypto, right? They're totally ignorant savages torturing people, or they are these divinely inspired sapiens from the 80s, right?
Well, I think it's the internet, but it's the interplay between the internet and everything else, including journalism, science journalism. Because this went on for years and years without one single article appearing in any newspaper or magazine. It built up a huge head of steam before anyone entered the fray, and even now, it isn't discussed in the mainstream media except for Fox News. And all the rest of it is cable and internet. So, you know, we are silent in the face of a tidal wave of pseudoscientific speculation. Should we be? Should we ignore it?
Some people call the internet the world's largest library without the benefit of librarians. Right? Other thoughts?
I just wanted to add one more idea to this. In the media, especially if we look at the preponderance of programming, like on the Science Channel, I mean, for God's sake, the Science Channel has a number of these, Maya 2012 doomsday shows, and there seems to be this need to tell two sides of the story, as if there's only two sides to a story and they have to be balanced. You know, and it doesn't matter that one side of the story is completely crazy. There's two sides, and you have to hear both sides and weigh them. And they love to leave those shows with the, will the world end in 2012? Well, I guess we'll have to find out.
I think this shows us why we cannot discount people's belief in pseudoscience. For many years we've said, oh, we don't care what they believe. I think now we know why we should care about what people believe.
Well, let's begin with some thoughts from the floor, and then we'll have more interaction. Do we need to turn that on, Maya?
There's still things on the TV and internet about that you can balance an egg on the first day of spring, and that still hasn't gone away. But a teacher of mine said that when he talked to the students that the sun will explode in about 4.5 billion years, they said, oh, they're really relieved. They thought it was 4 million years. So now they can sleep well at night. But how do they do the calendar? Do they include when they lost the 10 days when they went to Gregorian calendar? And how does this affect the date?
This is all correlated with the Gregorian calendar. All this calculation has been done since the Gregorian change. So the way that they actually calculate it is with Julian day numbers. So you all know, actually I was talking to an audience that understands Julian day numbers for the first time. But there's two correlations. One is the 584283 correlation, and the other is a 584285 correlation. And those two competing correlations are basically 2 days off, and that number that I just gave you is the date of the 3114 BC creation.
All right.
Since I'm not going to be here for the session, and in the spirit of shameless self-promotion, I wanted to mention I made a website countering a lot of this nonsense a little less than a year ago. Given the number of hits a lot of these things get, I'm proud to say it has almost 60,000 hits, of which 35,000 was the first week of this year. And it's still out there. If there's any errors, anybody finds a problem, particularly in the Mayan aspect, I consulted with our local anthropologist, but he was more of a glyph guy, not a bigger picture Mayan guy. But if you want to check it out, it's Google search and its bizarre ambiguity is put at the top of the search for 2012, are we going to die? Because I think you should get right to the chase, so you can check that out if you want. Thanks.
Yes?
Hi, I have a question and a suggestion. The question is to the group. Do we have any PIOs here?
Public information officers? Any public information officers?
Organizations? No? One? Okay, hi.
Please speak into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Didn't want you to hear. Then I'd like to recommend the PIOs to come out with a press release on this and do a preemptive strike. I did it in 1982 from Kid Pete with the Jupiter effect, which is, so. And it worked very well. We got our clipping service brought back a lot of good stories that were factually good on the right side of the issue.
Okay.
Well, I think that's an interesting suggestion, and I don't know how to respond to it. NASA does have things on its website. It's one of the few organizations that does. But we have not done what a number of people have written to me. They have said, why don't you get President Obama to go on national television and announce that the world will not end in December 21st of this year? What do you think of that idea?
Only half will listen to me.
The comment from the floor was that only half the people will listen to them. And of course, that is the big debate that we're having, and we will continue that discussion tomorrow in our news media session, is to what degree do we give credence to these crazy ideas by issuing a news release from an august organization like NOAO, and to what degree do we owe it to the public to be the source of reliable information? And that's a very difficult balance that each organization and all of us as a community are going to need to weigh. And that's certainly a discussion we want to continue. Elizabeth.
Thank you. Well, I think it's actually no laughing matter, as you pointed out. It's also no condescending matter. And I think it's really important that whenever we speak about it, that we're not using any tone of condescension to whoever we're trying to communicate. To be honest with you, my daughter is coming home for Christmas because she's afraid of 2012. My son was trying to get me to go to West Virginia or something when the planet was coming, you know? And what I have to say to them is, what I hear you saying is you're scared. What I hear you saying is, you know, you feel out of control about what's going on in the world, whether it's that, or the focus is at that, or it's global warming, or whatever. They're not living in, they don't get the National Geographics that I got when I was a kid, you know, which were gorgeous and beautiful. Life is gorgeous, and now it's all, you know, disappearing reefs and all that stuff. So I think this whole doom is coming from many, many different places. And I'm sorry to see that there's no psychologist, you know, on the board, on the panel here, who says, who are the people who seem to be more susceptible to this, and how can we understand that frame of mind so that we're more compassionate toward how they came to that point?
Interesting.
I've seen some posts about that from psychologists online. If you Google it, you will actually find this information. And you're right, they basically say that when someone expresses a fear, that you allow them to voice their fear, you tell them that you understand their fear, and you help them come to their own understanding of looking at this information, and when they feel empowered by looking at it, in a sense, helping them to debunk it themselves. They get the power back when they have the knowledge and they understand, oh, this really is not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that point a little bit more. We had a bit of a conversation over email about this, and Christine hit on it in her comments. You know, people are coming to us from a place of fear, and if we try to use rational argumentation to allay their fears, it's going to fall on deaf ears, because those are different parts of our brains that are reacting here. And someone who's coming to us and they're convinced the world is going to end, or you know, they're a person who believes in Nibiru and wants to prove it, this kind of idea that, oh, I can change your mind through rational argument is something that I think we need to get over, because it's not really working for us. And we need to try and figure out how to engage them on an emotional level and bring them away from that place of fear, and you know, if we can, actually replace fear with wonder, as Christine said.
I ask, that sounds like a real intensive one-on-one way to do it. Does that translate into things that, we could do publicly for everybody?
That is a good question.
But taking what you said further, I mean, it seems from what a number of panelists have said, and I think from our own experiences, that replacing fear with wonder is something astronomy is good at. My students often are worried about something approaching us or pulling us, and when you actually do an activity about scale, when you show them the distances, when you immerse them in the reality, sometimes that kind of solves the issue of some of the things they're afraid of. Knowledge is a wonderful thing. So although I agree that we need to do this in a psychological way, don't underestimate our power to show them the reality of the universe and replace that fear through knowledge. That would be my suggestion.
And I think maybe to pick up on that, we heard a little bit about the idea of the need for cognitive dissonance in order for there to be a change in people's thinking, and that those kinds of activities are very, very important. We may not be able to, convince someone that Beetlejuice isn't going to get them just by telling them that. But we could do activities about scale and both in space and time that might at least bring them to that point where they can reach that cognitive dissonance and hopefully make that change.
And as Mark said, understanding more about the Mayan system and the Mayan culture is really a big help to not seeing this as a end of the world kind of situation. Okay, next question.
I'm curious if anyone has done any demographic studies about who has what opinions about this. Because certainly the number 1 in 10, out of the hundreds of undergraduates that I've taught in the past few years, I'd say it's more like less than 1%, at least with that age group. And when I hear people who are really dedicated to this idea, it's the white over 40 crowd, it's really into it. But I don't know, it seems like there could be a huge distribution.
Well, I'll just mention, we were asking ourselves this question when we were preparing for the plenary, had there been any studies, and we were only able to find that Reuters-sponsored survey, and one of the things that I recall from it, Andy quoted the numbers that were worldwide. They did kind of look at individual countries and see how they varied. And the United States was a little less than the world average in the fear, which was interesting because it seems like sometimes we're afraid of our own shadows. But there was an additional question they asked about, because the question was interesting. They asked, do you think that the world will come to an end in your lifetime? There was an additional question of, do you think it'll end in 2012, as the Maya said? And then they asked, are you afraid of it? And it was interesting, about half the number of people who said they thought the world would come to an end were actually afraid of it. So that means there's another half of people who think the world's going to come to an end and they're just not afraid at all. I don't know what that means.
And if you want to find this, it was pretty easy to Google this poll, and as Brian said, there's quite a bit of detail on it. The title was 1 in 7 global citizens believe end of the world is coming in their lifetime. And it was Reuters News, R-E-U-T-E-R-S, Reuters News, that was doing the survey. So I think with that, you'll be able to find it if you want to see the numbers yourself. Dean.
Well, one question I was thinking of is, can we kind of handle this with humor a little bit too? And also make some money. We have an idea for on the 21st, we're going to be auctioning off the observatory to the highest bidder and see if we make money. And then on the 22nd, have a open house open to the general public to celebrate. And so the question would be, can we use humor for this and this purpose? And also work towards December 22nd. What's going to happen after this? How are we going to respond to this? And how can we make it so it doesn't happen again, I guess?
Well, I think we should be at least as confident as the folks at Palenque were, and make sure that we plan for celebrations well after the 21st. And, humor is another emotion, which is a pretty powerful one. I think we just do have to be careful that we're not belittling people's ideas and turning them off. But it is a very powerful, if it's done right, it could be a good strategy.
Yeah, I'm doing a class for freshmen this coming fall semester on the end of the world, basically, 25 different ways the world will end, could end. And on the syllabus, it'll say, if the world ends, you automatically all get an A.
And we do know that there's one group, I'm not giving any commercial plugs, but there's one group led by an astronomer from a major university that's planning a end-of-the-world doomsday cruise where they will go around some of the Mesoamerican sites. So that certainly is one other way. It's round trip, but when it ends, we don't know. All right, thank you. Next comment or question.
My comment is similar to that one. Maybe some of you remember a few months ago there was a news article about a library that was facing a tax vote. They were going to lose their library because the tax repeal vote came up. And then to counter it, their initiative was to sponsor a book burning. They made a Facebook page and they invited people to bring all their unnecessary books to burn. And the community was so offended that they decided to support the library and they voted the tax in to keep the library. So in that line, maybe we should set up a donation page. If you find someone who's absolutely intractable and determined to argue that the world will in fact end, you encourage them to donate their life savings to an astronomy organization. And we pledge that we will use that in an appropriate way the day after the event. I think in some of these cases, maybe our people really are truly frightened, but sometimes people like to just doubt the conventional wisdom. And when you put it to their pocketbooks, they'll back off. So if you really believe that, give me your money. And and if they do, well, then we got money.
Thank you. Next, Art.
So I wanted to also put this, I think there was a little bit of a discussion about the context of this year and kind of a lot of the other things that are going on with global warming and refineries burning and putting toxins in the air, for example, in our area yesterday. Much more hazardous probably than my calendar ending. So I'm just wondering if there is, I think that we are at a point right now, and I think a lot of us hear this and discuss it probably within our teams, that there needs to be a shift to the positive, to visioning a future that's sustainable, that does go on. And not only is it an opportunity to teach about science and about a lot of these concepts, but I think it's an opportunity for us to turn this negative fear into hope and inspiration. And I think that we can do with the public, that we can do on websites, that we can do on the radio. So.
One comment, and I'm again just speaking anecdotally from those who write to me and write on the internet, is a lot of the people who are sure that the world is going to end are generally disillusioned. They believe that the government lies to them on everything. They believe NASA lies to them about UFOs and whether we went to the moon or not, and global warming. They believe that Obama lies to them about any number of 25 things. And so they're really disillusioned. They are honestly confused, unhappy, fearful people. Now maybe that's just the tiny tip of the iceberg. But they basically, and they are convinced, by the way, that the government has built bunkers in which 1 million of the elite will survive this while everyone else, and the phrase used to be several times, is left on the surface to die.
I just want to say that I've done a lot of work with middle school and high schools and gone and done a lot of talks, and the children are genuinely afraid. And when you listen to their fear and you go through, and while you're debunking it, you go, and this doesn't make sense, right? And the children look at you and go, no, it doesn't make sense. And by the end, I said, well, how many of you are still worried? And the hands have all gone down. All they want is for an adult to listen to their fears, to tell them it's going to be okay, and tell them why it's going to be okay. And the most telling question I get from these young people is, why are people telling us this stuff if it isn't true? And then they answer their own question and go, oh, because somebody wants to make money off of it.
So, Brian and Mark, I've heard you talk quite a bit about how this is also an opportunity, and we've talked quite a bit about multicultural education here at the conference. This is really an opportunity to show that the Maya had a very large number of really good ideas about the world and interesting ideas about the world, and that the Maya are still around. It's not just the ancient Mayas. So do you want to comment at all on that in terms of the value in education?
Actually, the last slide I had up was the slide just before this one. I like to say that the Maya are a lot more interesting than just world-ending doomsayers. This recent discovery, for instance, 4 numbers painted on a wall in the 8th century. They're all multiples of 365, 584, which is the period of Venus, and many other astronomical cycles and numerical cycles. And they just were a lot more complicated than this one-dimensional world-ending prophets, you know. I like to say, yeah, it's really cool if they could see the future, but even if they couldn't, they saw other cool things. And again, it's just a way of turning the question on its head. I'm not sure how many things you can stuff into well, the Maya aren't world enders, but they did believe this. You can do, but just one little thing like this is very interesting, and it leads to, again, this is mathematical, an opportunity for why do people think that the number 584 is cool. And I should mention that the Venus cycle, 584 days, if you multiply that by 5, it equals 8 times 365. And so, May 8th, 2001, where Venus is in the sky, will be, as most of you already know, it's the same date, Venus will be in the same place 8 years later, right? Or 8 years later, 5 Venus cycles later. That kind of coincidence is something that our brains latch onto, right? I think we're pattern seekers, and it's a coincidence. It's sheer coincidence that it's nearly a perfect year, that the Venus cycle, this small multiple and stuff. But that kind of link has a kind of mystical quality that appeals to people on a gut level. And I think that that's one of the things that the Maya loved about these numerological things. And just then it leads to the question, what is numerology? Why are numbers interesting? What is so cool about the number 9? That it's the fractions all have to be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. You know what I'm saying? That kind of stuff is kind of fascinating me. It made me interested in math as a child. That's just the beginning. Each lesson learned some more.
And I guess the tactic that we try to take in the Calendar in the Sky project is, again, to take the opportunity to celebrate the Maya culture, and especially we've been working, to engage Latino audiences, especially Mexican American audiences, because there's a lot of pride in the fact that they have this great culture that in their own land, and having a chance to celebrate that culture gives them an opening to think about science as something that actually belongs to their culture. We can say, look at the Maya. They were great scientists. They studied the sky. They built great monuments to honor these mysteries they had uncovered. And that's a part of your heritage, and you can continue forward in that heritage in the modern era of science.
All right, we'll take one more question. I'm sorry, we are out of time just about, and we'll be able to continue this in other sessions. Yes?
Yeah, my question is somewhat related to comments that were made. Yeah, I'm just wondering if anybody out there have gone out to the Mayan people and asked these same questions that we're asking, and to get their input. I know that there are Mayan people that are still out there, renowned, knowledgeable, credible people, and I'm wondering what they're saying. I talked to a couple, and they tell me, it's just another cycle. We're just going to start another cycle, because that's all that's going to happen. And so I'm just wondering if anybody going out there, the mines are still alive. It's Southern California, we're in 1,000. If we go down into Mexico, 1,000. And so there must be still information out there that
All right, so let's let our panel answer. Yeah.
Bob Sittler, Robert Sittler, a professor in Florida, I forget which university, has done a whole lot of field work with Maya about the 2012 meme, both in the early 2000s, before any of them had even heard about the should I say, the internet craziness about it. At that time, there were Maya elders who traditionally would say, "Oh well, we expect the sky to fall on Hawaii." Essentially, is how they put it, and the land to return to the Maya sometime soon, but we don't know a specific date. And then, as the 2012 meme progressed, and many tourists and many seekers of knowledge went to the Maya elders and said, "So what do you think is going to happen?" They essentially, several of them have assumed let's just say what the internet is saying, and they are capitalizing. They're making a buck on it too, just like the rest of us. And so there's a few Maya elders who say, "Well, we expect something like this to happen, but we don't expect the calendar to end. Like you said, a new cycle." And that's sort of the main thing that's going on. And most of the people capitalizing on it, Hunbat's man is probably the most famous Maya self-appointed shaman, I guess you'd call him, about this, has said this is not the end, this is an opportunity to renew the world and to renew our faith and whatever. Typical. In fact, it's interesting, I've noticed in the past 5 years that the tenor of the discussion about what's going to happen in 2012 on the internet has changed from destruction and apocalypse to spiritual renewal. I mean, as it gets closer, people are like, "Well, I don't really believe the world's going to end. Let's take this as an opportunity." I think that's a good thing in one sense, but it's amazing. I think that there are between 2,000 and 3,000 printed books about the 2012 thingamajig, and 4 of them are written by scientists. 5 if you count Bob Sittler.
So we will need to end there with the notion of opportunity. We'll continue in the salon next door after the break. Let's thank the panel and everyone who was here.